Imagine waking up one morning, stepping outside your front door, and somewhere in that exact moment, at that very second, there are hundreds of thousands of men and women already on duty across America, wearing a badge, carrying a firearm, patrolling streets, answering emergency calls, standing between chaos and calm, and you have probably never once stopped to ask yourself just how many of these people actually exist. How are they organized? Where do they work? What do they earn? And what does their presence truly mean for the 335 million people living in the United States of America? Because the answer, when you truly sit with it, is far more complex, far more fascinating, and far more important than most people ever realize. So let us slow down, go deep, and explore this question together from the very beginning, piece by piece, number by number, story by story. Because this is not just about statistics, this is about understanding the enormous human machine that is American law enforcement. There are more than 750,000 sworn law enforcement officers currently serving in the United States National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. And when you say that number out loud, 750,000, it sounds large, but let us put it in perspective. That is roughly the entire population of the city of Seattle, Washington, all of them trained, certified, armed, and deployed across one of the most geographically vast and socially diverse nations on Earth, which immediately tells you that policing in America is not one simple system. It is a layered, fragmented, deeply complex web of agencies operating at every level of government, from the tiniest rural township to the most powerful federal departments in Washington, D.C. There are 17,985 police agencies in the United States, which include local police departments, county sheriff's offices, state troopers, and federal law enforcement agencies, Wikipedia. And this is the first thing you must truly understand. Unlike countries such as France or the United Kingdom, which have centralized national police forces with unified command, the United States deliberately chose a decentralized model, meaning your local city police department in a small town in Kansas operates completely independently from the State Highway Patrol in Kansas, which operates independently from the FBI field office, also located in Kansas. They all share the same geography, but the answer to entirely different chains of command, different budgets, different laws, and different communities. And this is not an accident. This is by design, rooted in America's deep constitutional philosophy of local governance and the fear of centralized power that the Founding Fathers built into the very DNA of this nation. Now let us talk about the numbers more carefully, because they shift depending on what you measure. In 2023, there were 720,652 full-time law enforcement officers employed in the United States, an increase from 708,001 the previous year, Statista. And separately, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were about 666,990 police and sheriff's officers in 2024, Safe Home. Now, you might wonder why these numbers are different, and the reason is that different organizations count differently. Some count only sworn patrol officers, some include detectives and investigators, some include federal agents, some include correctional officers and civilian staff. So when you hear varying figures in the news or online, that is why. The underlying reality is that the total law enforcement workforce in America sits comfortably above 700,000 when you include all full-time sworn personnel across all levels of government. And about 137,000 of those officers work for federal law enforcement agencies, Wikipedia, which means agencies like the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshal Service, the Secret Service, Customs and Border Protection, and the Department of Homeland Security. And here's something that surprises most people. A federal agent and your local city police officer technically have different jurisdictions, different training requirements, and vastly different investigative authorities. So when you see an FBI agent on television solving a kidnapping case, that agent cannot simply walk into a local murder investigation and take over. There are legal protocols, jurisdictional agreements, and cooperative frameworks that govern how these different agencies work together, which is why major criminal cases often involve what is called a task force, where local, state, and federal officers all collaborate under one coordinated operation. Let us now talk about where the concentration of officers actually is, because the distribution across America is wildly unequal and reveals something deeply important about how safety is prioritized in this country. The District of Columbia has 70 officers per 10,000 residents, the highest rate in the nation, followed by Louisiana, New York, and Mississippi, safe home. And think about what that tells you. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, home to the White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court, has by far the densest police presence in America because the security requirements of a seat of global power are unlike anywhere else. While on the other end of the spectrum, you have vast rural states where a single county sheriff's department might cover an area the size of a small European country, with only a handful of officers on duty at any given time, meaning that when you call 911 in some parts of rural Montana or rural Wyoming, your nearest officer might be 45 minutes away. That is not negligence, that is geography, that is budget, and that is the stark reality of policing across 3.8 million square miles of territory. Now let us talk about who these officers actually are as people, because behind every badge is a human being with a background, an identity, and a life story. 19.7% of all law enforcement officers are women, while 80.3% are men. The average law enforcement age is 39 years old, and the most common ethnicity is white at 59.6%, followed by Hispanic or Latino at 18.2%, and Black or African American at 13.3% Zipia. And these demographic numbers matter enormously because they reflect a long-standing tension in American policing, which is the question of whether the people enforcing the law actually look like, understand, and represent the communities they serve. And this is a debate that exploded into national and global consciousness in 2020, following the death of George Floyd, which sparked the largest civil rights protest movement in American history, prompted cities across the country to re-examine their policing models, and triggered serious conversations about diversity recruitment, implicit bias training, and the relationship between law enforcement and communities of color, a conversation that is very much still ongoing today. Police officers earn an average of $79,320 nationally, with California officers earning the most at $111,630, which is 41% higher than the national average, and Mississippi officers earning the least at $45,450, which is 43% below the national average. Safe home. And when you understand this wage gap, you begin to understand one of the deepest crises facing American policing right now, which is recruitment and retention. Because if you're a young person considering a law enforcement career, and you know you will be placing your life at risk every single day, dealing with mental health trauma, working night shifts, missing holidays with your family, and someone in California is being paid more than double what you would earn in Mississippi for the exact same job, the math becomes very difficult, which is why in February 2024, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry declared a state of emergency due to officer shortages, citing a 47% increase in resignations since 2019 and 1,800 vacant positions for sheriff's deputies, while the Long Beach Police Department reported its worst staffing crisis in 25 years, with over 100 job vacancies. These are not isolated stories. They are symptoms of a national staffing emergency that is quietly reshaping how safe communities across America actually are. Because when departments are understaffed, response times go up, officers on duty are overworked and burned out, morale collapses, mistakes increase, and the very public safety infrastructure that millions of Americans depend on begins to fracture from within. Police spending in the U.S. in 2025 totaled $115 billion across all levels of government, representing a 3.7% increase from 2024, with personnel costs dominating budgets at 68.2% and technology spending showing the highest growth rate at 7.9%, reflecting accelerating adoption of body cameras, data analytics platforms, and cybercrime investigation tools. The global statistics meaning that as the human workforce struggles, technology is stepping in to fill gaps with artificial intelligence-driven predictive policing software, license plate readers, drone surveillance, and real-time crime centers becoming standard tools in major American cities, raising their own profound questions about privacy, civil liberties, and the balance between public safety and government surveillance in a democratic society. There were 148 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty in 2024, National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, and that number, 148 human beings who kissed their families goodbye and never came home, reminds us that behind every statistic in this conversation, there are real lives, real sacrifices, real grief, and real courage. And whether you deeply trust law enforcement or have serious questions and grievances about how policing has functioned in your community, the sheer scale of what we have discussed today, 750,000 officers, 18,000 agencies, $115 billion in spending, 50 different state systems, thousands of federal agents, rural counties with 4 deputies, and urban precincts with thousands, all of it adds up to one unavoidable truth. The American policing system is one of the most complicated, consequential, and deeply human institutions on the face of this earth. And understanding it, really understanding it, not through headlines, not through outrage, not through political talking points, but through data, history, nuance, and honest curiosity, is not just interesting, it is necessary, because the question of how a society protects itself, who it trusts to do that protecting, how it trains and pays and holds accountable the people wearing the badge, and how it ensures that safety is delivered equally to every neighborhood, regardless of zip code or skin color, that question does not belong to politicians or police chiefs alone. It belongs to every single one of us, and it starts exactly where this video started, with the courage to simply ask how many, and then go deep enough to actually understand why the answer matters.